Hello, lovely people of Visa Franchise. Welcome to another live episode from our offices here in Miami. I'm joined today by Joaquin Rosales Aramburu, who is an immigration attorney who is working with us as our in-house cancel. You're gonna get
Counsel.
canceled, Joaquin.
Counsel.
Counsel.
And counsel. Yes.
Counsel. Joaquin, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Thanks. Alaattin. Pretty good. Happy Friday. How you doing?
Thank you so much. TGIF, thank God it's Friday. We want to do this every week now, Joaquin. Do
Sure.
these live streams and try to address the questions of our audience, as we believe that these are very, very beneficial. Now, let me get right to it. Today, we'll be talking about the possible pathways from the E2 visa to obtaining a green card. Most often than not, our clientele, when they come here with the E2 visa, they tend to like the country within a few years. Some like it immediately. Some come here by US being their dream destination all along. And they invest a lot, not only money, but also their time. And they take, they go through a big journey. And if their business pick up and if they like here and when they have children here, they try to make sure that they are permanent. And,
Yep.
It's a natural progression to seek a green card. We have been helping people, our clients, with the E2 visa for over a decade now. And at some point, Joaquin, we realized that, okay, people come here, start with the E2 visa, and they may end up liking the US. Not all do, but some do. And for those, we said, okay, how can we help our clientele with a possible path to green card? And this is when, and this was many, many years ago, when we have perfected our craft of helping them with the EB2 NIW, EB1A, EB5, or EB1C to sort of get them the permanent residency that they're looking for. This is not what we are known for, but this is something we have been doing for a very, very long time. First of all, Joaquin Rosales Aramburu, help us clear the air on the E2 visa being a non-immigrant visa. Is it really a non-immigrant visa, or is it a dual intent visa? What's the situation? I make a promise coming here that I'm going to return back to my country when I'm done with it. But hey, things might change along the way. So is it a dual intent visa?
Yeah. So there's two separate issues. So you spoke about non-immigrant and immigrant. So it's important to make a distinction. So the E2 is a non-immigrant visa. Essentially, any visa that doesn't give you a residency, it's a non-immigrant visa. Tourist, student, E2, L1, O1, those are non-immigrant visas, right? Then you get into the immigrant visas, and those are the EB1s, EB2s, right? EB3s, EB5s, etc. So there's two distinctions. Within those visas, all the ones that I just mentioned and much more, each visa has either a single intent or a dual intent. What does that mean? So at its base core, let's just use very simple examples. A tourist visa. Everybody knows a tourist visa. A lot of people get the tourist visa over here. So that tourist visa is a single intent visa. So that means that you're supposed to go back home. Okay. You're not really supposed to come here and then attempt to stay here for a longer period of time that you're given initially. So that is in theory. In reality, and this applies to the E2 as well, right? And other visas, there's sort of like a non-spoken but agreed upon rule called the 90-day rule that applies a lot in these situations for people who are, say, in tourist visa, where the government understands that life happens, and then after 90 days or so, you might make a choice and say, hey, you know what? Initially, I wasn't trying to defraud the government. I wasn't trying to lie to the government, the U.S. government, when I came in. I truly wanted to come in and be a tourist or whatever it may be. But then after a couple of months, I realized, there was avenues for me to become a resident. Spoke to attorneys, spoke to specialists like Visa Franchise, and then I realized that I have a shot at staying here, and I feel like I should stay here, and I want to stay here, right? So then that's a good distinction to make, even though there's these visas that say it's a single intent, dual intent. There is this overall understanding that life happens if there's enough time, where it's a reasonable time for the government to say, you know what, yeah, it makes sense that after a couple of months you decided perhaps you have good opportunities here in the United States, you want to stay here in the United States. If you apply and you're approved, then you should stay here. So
Of course.
it's good for you to bring that up and for our audience to know that there's those differences.
Very good. It's beautiful. Guys, thank you very much for joining. By the way, if you have any questions, please, this is the time to send those questions in. I'll be taking those questions, we'll be highlighting, and we'll be talking about those. But we also have a natural course of our live stream. So, yes. Okay. Back to the E2 visa. Joaquin, thank you very much for clearing the air. E2 visa being traditionally a non-immigrant visa, a single intent visa, but after some time, you're saying it has been considered highly among the immigration community that maybe, a few months down the line, a year down the line, or 2 years down the line, things could change and the E2 visa holder might seek a permanent residency, although traditionally that's not what the visa is for. Thank you very much for that. And now let's talk about some possible ways for the green card. Obviously, the EB category, EB1, EB2, EB3, EB5. Let's start with some of the easiest ones that we can appeal to, and then we can talk about the harder ones. How about if we talk about the EB2 NIW, or let's talk about the EB2 NIW at the very end. Let's talk about the EB5 first, because we might run out of time.
All right.
That was a joke.
Lots to talk about, especially on this topic now with a lot of buzz from this administration about
is EB5 running out of time? Address that first, please.
I don't think so. No. First off, just for everybody, this is a question that we've been getting a lot, and in this administration, we've heard they're trying to implement all the visas, the so-called golden visa, which would be just another option. But the EB5 program is a Congress-made program. There was a process where Congress approved it, right? And then it's a law essentially, right? So it has an expiration date, and that's in 2027. So unless there's another Congress-approved sort of legislation where this is canceled, I highly doubt that the EB5 program is going away. And I tell you this because the EB5 program is a program that is very attached to the locality of this country, meaning in local cities and states, because these programs are focused and aimed to help cities and rural areas with high unemployment rates, and rural areas where there isn't much incentive to build and develop new projects, right? So this is very tied to Congress people, and they love obviously bringing in jobs to their own districts. So it'll be very hard. I mean, at least I believe, for them to sort of reverse course on something that was already passed through Congress. And they have until 2027. In 2027, right, it expires. They have to go back and sit down. So perhaps at that point, there might be an opportunity to change it. But I think it's a very popular thing in Congress overall. There might be a push by the administration to get rid of it, but in the end, I think it's a popular thing overall. They might add on new opportunities like the golden visa that's been floating around a lot. It's just more opportunities for you to get a green card. So
Joaquin, I appreciate your point of view on the EB5. Obviously, you're an immigration attorney, and you guys are, you brought up with ideals and what is right, and always doing, what is right. So that's a very noble thing, and this is what you would expect from an immigration attorney or from somebody who's been in immigration. Hey, look, there's a way these things are done. Here are the details, and whatever the case may be. Yet, we, the foreign investors, I'm out of focus. We, the foreign investors, do not necessarily look at it that way. They say, hold on a minute. There is a program. I understand it's being grandfathered up until 2026 and the 2027 as well. Technically, I can do it. But now I have a big enemy against the program, which happens to be the sitting president of the United States of America and the current administration. So would I depend on a program which has the current administration of the United States of America as an enemy in front of me? This is just a basic sense that any savvy investor or anybody who's taking a risk would calculate. Of course, we all agree the United States is not a banana republic, and there is a process for everything. But just, even hearing from the current administration, people would, rethink that particular possibility and look at some alternative routes. And one of those alternative routes we've been talking about is EB1A and EB1Cs. How would one progress to EB1As and EB1Cs is going to be my question. But before I ask you that question, let's hear from Martin Orwinski. What is the success rate to get a green card from E2? What will help in that process? It's a bit of a broad question. I don't know how you would like to address that, Joaquin.
Well, yeah, in terms of success rate, it really depends on the person. It's all circumstantial. In the end, I think that one topic that we always talk about is if you're here in the United States and you have the opportunity to prove to the government, right, that you're able to help this country in some manner, will it be economically, financially, intellectually, whatever it may be, socially, then you're positioning yourself in a much better place when you're trying to apply for a residency, right? So the proof is in the pudding. You've been here in the States. You've demonstrated that, you've created jobs, that you're an entrepreneur, let's say. Let's just stick to that. That, in theory, client. And you've proven that you are stimulating the economy, that you're employing American citizens, residents, etc. And that's going to be a good profile to put forth after a couple of years. Some people do it in less time, obviously, to then later on position yourself and say, hey, you want a person like me. I'm a person of extraordinary ability, right? Which is basically the language utilized for the EB1A, right? Or exceptional ability if you want to do EB2 NIW. And you should have someone like me in this country, right? And it doesn't have to be only within the entrepreneur class, which we'll talk about a little bit. They've sort of narrowed down a little bit what they sort of consider what an entrepreneur is. If you want to apply under the EB2 NIW, that's a conversation we'll have later on. But there's multiple different types of fields that are of importance, not only for the EB2 NIW, but it's just for the country overall, that will position yourself in a really good manner when you want to make that argument to the government. Hey, I've been here. I'm here on E2. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm employing people. I'm bringing in tax revenue. You want people like me here.
Very good. And that kind of ties in with the next question from Thomas Jameson. Do I need to hire U.S. workers to increase my chances of getting a green card?
Yeah, it looks better. It looks better. I mean, it's not an obligation for the E2. I mean, once again, when you're doing an E2 as an attorney, you're thinking to yourself, well, I mean, part of the reason why this visa was approved and the program is in place is because they want foreigners to invest in this country and then to create jobs in the country, right? So if you're able to, from the onset, have employees, that's great. Eventually, as a projection, and obviously, that we do that in the business plans that we facilitate in the process. It's a matter of projecting, how many employees in the future do you see this business bringing in, how much tax dollars are you going to bring in, etc. So just like it is in the E2, eventually when you're positioning yourself to try to apply for a residency. You want to demonstrate that you've employed people, right? You want to demonstrate that you brought in tax dollars, right? So that's essentially not an obligation, but it certainly looks a lot better for your argument, right?
Is it location specific, Joaquin? That's what Zlatan Basic is asking. Is it, for example, easier in certain states and harder in another state, or is it more like a centralized thing that it's same for everyone?
So immigration is a federal thing. So when we're talking about whether or not you want to have sort of strongest argument, in the end, they don't care if it's in Florida, Texas, New York, Oklahoma. It doesn't matter, right? As a matter of fact, I guess you can make the argument for sure that if you're focusing and you're sort of creating jobs in areas that usually rural areas that you don't see that much sort of stimulation, economic stimulation, that's even a better argument, I'm assuming for sure. But overall, they care about just the economy overall, employing people overall. So it's not like one place is better than other. In terms of an argument for an attorney, yeah, I can
It's a
see
federal thing.
it's a better alternative. Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's carry on with our natural rundown. Let's talk about the EB1 briefly, EB1A, EB1C, before we talk about EB2 NIW. So I'm an entrepreneur, Joaquin. I came to this country, bought a franchise, opened up, my business. I'm employing people, and I'm, doing really good. And I continue working on my career and my personal brand and personal profile to become a better version of myself. I'm trying everything that is in my power so that my business performs better. And I'm really and truly becoming a name to reckon with in that particular niche that I am in. So I might want to make an argument for EB1A or EB1C. How would that process look like?
Yeah. So you want to be in a position where you meet as many criteria as possible. Right? We've discussed criteria on the EB1A space, on the O1A space, which is essentially the same thing. It's just at a higher level of evidence that you need to demonstrate. But you want to position yourself that, and then you also want to relate it to what you've done. Remember, obviously E2 is an investment visa, but there might be instances where you're investing and you have a business that deals with what you've done your entire career. You might be a tech person, right? You might be entrepreneur, but that has finance backgrounds, and you're doing your business based on that. So you want to relate that back to what you've done in the past as well, what your history has been, and then something that you can work on while you're here. So you can meet criteria related to a higher remuneration, for example, not only in the past, but here in the present in the United States, right? You want to meet criteria related to being part of distinguished organizations or associations. You you might be so successful in your business that you're getting some PR coverage, right? You're getting some articles written about your business. What great applications, perhaps, or what great companies you've been working with, and all of those are things that are positioning yourself into a much better place when you're making those arguments into the EB1A. So the idea is just that even if you're not doing something that is perhaps what you have done as a career and you're doing something different for the E2 purposes, it doesn't mean that you cannot work on your own profile based on what you've done before and sometimes what you're doing currently here in the United States. So it's all about enhancing your criteria. It's all about demonstrating that you are at that higher echelon. And this is a progressing thing, right? It's not static. We always talk about how, people believe that I either, qualify or I don't qualify. But that's in this particular moment. It doesn't mean that you cannot qualify in the future. So just like you said,
Nobody's
earlier,
born
you want to work on yourself. Yeah, you want to work on yourself. Exactly.
That's that's super important. And I do believe that it is very, very important. And in a way, it's easier to do it with a business, is because the business can give you a leverage. So, for example, just like you said, that you could use your business to, launch a project and do certain things that could get some press coverage.
Yep.
You can implement a new methodology, get some, patents that could be counted as original contribution to that particular niche that you're in. But I guess it is
hired by the government. You can be hired by the government, federal or state level, for big projects, right? Let's say you have a tech company or something like that, right? And you're being hired to, I don't know, develop an application to make transportation easier in Miami. That's going to be part of the criteria of a contribution, most likely within the EB1A, right? So,
and if you
that's something
take
they have
that
to think about.
contribution and
Yeah.
and a newspaper picks it up or the press picks it up, all of a sudden you got some things that are written about you
For
and
sure.
your contributions and your business. So
Absolutely.
I guess what I get to speak to a lot of people who are looking to buy a franchise, set up their own businesses, or move their existing businesses in other countries to the US. And we generally start talking about E2 visa and what visa franchise can do for them to facilitate this particular process. But I always ask them, is there any intention to get a green card? Not everyone has the intention of, obtaining a green card right away. But most often than not, people say, well, if things go fine, maybe in the future, we might consider that. And then to that, I say, okay, why don't we look at your business from today and make sure that we structure it in such a way that could give you a much greater leverage should you follow a path to green card in the future. So would you say it is important to do the right structure from day one?
Planning is key. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, if that's something that it might be a remote idea in the back of your head, why not just plan around it anyway, right? So once again, we're getting into, intention and all that. Originally, obviously, your intention is just to leave the States, but it doesn't mean that it can be an idea, right? So I don't want to get into, legal jargon, and that's not the point of this conversation. But in the end, if it might be a possibility in the back of your head that you potentially at some point you could be in a situation where you change your mind and you want to stay in the United States, not immediately, but later on. It's a really good idea to structure your first visa around your potential future plans. Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Guys, if you haven't liked the video so far, the live stream, please do so, as the YouTube algorithm tends to promote those live streams that have big time likes and big time questions and comments. And let's address Sudhir's question very briefly before we talk about the EB2 and NIW. Could one have E2 and L1A at the same time and go to green card via EB1C? Very particular question.
Yeah, you can't really have an you can't really have an E2 and then L1A at the same time, right? Because an E2 you have to focus on the job that you not the job, but the business that you propose that you are going to work on, right? Your business, whether it be a franchise, whatever, you start your own business, that's your own main focus. You can't be working on a different business. Whereas the L1 is basically an executive transfer visa, and then you are transferring a high level executive from the main country where that company operates to the United States to expand operations to the United States. So you can do both at the same time. That's not something for the EB1C purposes. The L1, it's the best pathway because essentially what an L1A is or an L1 overall is just a baby EB1C, right? You're saying, look, we have an executive, a higher level management person that we need in the United States, and we need that person to go expand our business, our clientele base, whatever it may be over there. So we need that person to be there. And then usually what occurs is that they progress from an L visa into an EB1C green card. And it's essentially the same thing. It's just a little more evidence, right? And then that is demonstrated through the work, once again, that you've proven that you've done already here in the States. So we go back to the same point once again. You've come in here on a non-immigrant visa, you prove yourself here in the United States, and then you move on to bigger and better things like a visa that gives you a green card. So just like that example, you come in here with an L1 visa, which is a non-immigrant visa, just like we spoke, doesn't give you a residency. You do what you have to do here. You do it well, right? You position yourself in a great manner in order to then apply for a visa that gives you a green card. In this case, an EB1C. So you get a green card based on the work that you have done here.
Thank you very much for that, Joaquin Rosales Aramburu. Cool. All right. So let's talk about, I don't know how to term this, creme de la creme, the easiest or the lowest hanging fruit, as some people term to call it. I don't want to get into all the marketing terms for this particular route, but it seems to be, and it has been, in the past couple of years, the most popular way of getting a green card is the EB2 NIW, national interest. So let's talk about how one comes here with the E2 visa and has the business is doing good, provided that the business has a certain angle for national interest. It could be a franchise operating in a healthcare industry, finance industry, education, tutoring, junk removal, you name it. Would I be able to make a good national importance argument and potentially seek E2, EB2 NIW?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely, you can. But I think what you said at the beginning is really important. It depends on what you're doing here, and if you're going to rely on what you have been working on as a business here in the United States as a basis to apply for the EB2 NIW. So if you're doing an industry that is of importance, I don't know, you're very heavy on artificial intelligence. You do some sort of applications or technology related to topics of interest in national security, right? Biotechnology, critical infrastructure, stuff like that. Then, yeah, absolutely, that could be a very well positioned place to be in order to jump onto an EB2 NIW, right? I think it'll be harder to make an argument, right, if you do just not to minimize any sort of business or franchise, but I think it'll be harder
A
to,
burger joint would be harder.
yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
exactly, to say, look, I opened up a burger joint and
An
then
ice
now,
cream shop.
yeah, and then I'm going to now be of national importance. That's going to be a tough one to make.
Why?
But
I provide people fresh, refreshing ice creams at the heat.
let me
At
tell you
the
something.
peak of the
If I
heat
was
here
like
in
an
Miami.
immigration officer, I would approve that visa immediately. So,
Yeah.
but I'll
Okay.
probably get fired later on. But yes. So we have to focus on the reality. That's why it's called a national interest waiver. So they're waiving a very detailed and sort of long process, which is a labor certification process. Me and you have talked about it. So they're waiving that entire obstacle, that entire process, because you're doing something that's really good for the country. So tell me, what is it that you're doing that's really good for the country? So I think that depending on the business that you're doing, and we see a lot of businesses now, especially with people who are starting their own businesses, they are focusing on tech oriented, AI oriented, right? Sort of infrastructure and a lot of topics that can be sort of related to national security, right? Also education. Look, all sorts of topics that are national interest, and it's certainly viable for sure. It is.
Okay, cool. EB2 NIW, recently it has been subject to certain changes, and everybody is thinking, oh, is it getting harder? Are they raising the bar? How shall we qualify for the EB2 NIW now? Is it imperative to own a business that is active here in the US, or can I just go there and apply with my advanced degree and without a business or a business plan, but just, showing and proving to the USCIS who I am and what I have achieved and how I plan to contribute to the United States of America?
Yeah, I think that what you mentioned earlier was a very good point to bring up. It's been low hanging fruit and creme de la creme, very very well marketed visa, and I think that he got a little bit of abuse, and some people were slipping through the cracks of this visa, right? And USCIS sort of said, okay, guys, we can't have, there's a purpose to this visa. We can't have people that really, even though they might be good at what they do, aren't really fitting what the purpose of this visa is. So it's not like they made it harder, they just clarified it a little bit more, right?
Okay.
And to answer your question, yes, the days of seeing potentially an approval without having a very well set plan as to what your proposed endeavor is, I think are gone. That I think it's a must. Before it was a must, for me for sure, but it's certainly a must now. And now they're just sort of raising a little bit of the bar relating to, well, what are you going to be doing here? Can you tell me what your plan is? Like you can't just simply say, I'm really good at all these different things, but what's your plan though?
I
How are
have
you
a
going
master's
to
degree and a good heart.
Yeah, exactly. So you have
Does
to
that
really
not
have a
count?
plan. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. And by the way, just to make the clarification, it doesn't really only have to be you starting a business or something, or like a consulting firm or something like that, right? You can make a very well thought out, with the help of experts, of course, professional plan that details how your track record in your country or other countries where you worked and you have excelled in what you do, right, can position yourself to get a job at, pretty big company here, or even the government, right, in a department that needs the help and it's of national interest. So it's not only business related. I want to open my own business, my own consulting. No, it's also my professional plan. How I can help, the government, how I can help companies in the United States be better. So just want to make that clarification so people don't think, oh, I have to 100% have sort of my own business, and that's the only way that I can go through this.
Thank you for that, Joaquin. We got a new question. Asim Mukhtar. What's the max decision timelines after submitting an RFE response from USCIS?
Depends if you did it premium processing or you didn't. If you did not do it premium processing, fortunately, my friend, I can tell you through experience that it could be quite a while. I've seen responses within 2 weeks, and I've seen responses in 6 months. So it's all a matter of like luck. Sometimes what they're doing, given staff shortages, they'll send out cases to different locations and officers that have supposed to have less of a backlog. But sometimes that's not the case. That's what they think, and then you end up with an officer that has a huge backlog, and then you're looking at more time. So there really isn't one direct answer. The only one that I can tell you for sure is that if you did pay for premium processing, you're supposed to get an answer within the time frame that the premium processing entails, depending on the visa, which is usually either 15 business days or 45 business days. 45 business days applies to the EB2 and NIW usually.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Joaquin. Guys, we still have about 10 to 15 more minutes that we're going to be here. There is quite a few of you watching the show across different platforms, whether that's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. We want to dedicate this part of the show for Q&A. So if you have any questions, there's no bad question. So let's waive the stigma. Just send in your question. We're going to try to answer them as much as we can. Otherwise, we're going to go with the natural rundown of the show and close the show in the upcoming minutes. And as I was saying, Sudhir sends in another question. And if you haven't liked the video so far, please do like the video so that it gets promoted while we are live and people come in and join in, and we would have a great synergy here. So the question here is, which ports are better for E2 and L1A visas? Is it from Canada, port of entries? Well,
so for E2 visas, you don't really do it at the port of entry, right? You do it at the consulate. But for L1s in Canada, you can do it, and Canada has a very, very good reputation when it comes to Ls. You can literally show up at the port and show it to a CBP officer, which is different than sending it in to an officer sitting, in a desk all day long, just looking at paperwork, right? Instead of interacting with people, it's more of like a personable thing. And I was just at an ALA South Florida conference, And I was sitting down there, and there was this attorney who works in Canada, and all they do is E's and L's. That's all they do. And she was just talking and loving the fact of how much she loves. A lot of immigration attorneys don't have the best opinion of CBP officers for other reasons or other visas, but she was just gushing about how much she loved CBP officers in that particular country, right? The United States, in that border, right? Because the approval rate is just very high, and they're just like, yes, that's fine, it's fine. So she loved that, and that's something that it's been known across the board before. So Canada is really good when it comes to that. I guess if we want to sort of dive into the other side of the question when it comes to E2s, yeah, certain consulates have their reputation. This is something that is very well known across the board. Some consulates are harder than others. Some consulates, for example, in the Middle East, tend to be a little bit tougher when it comes to proving whether or not you have ties to your community and you're not going to just stay in the United States. So some consulates just have a bad reputation of having just bad officers, right? But this is a good thing that I want to let everybody know, that you can do what we call, give you a little secret here, what we call forum shopping. So there are countries across the world that will take third country nationals, and they will process E2 applications, even though you're not a resident or citizen of that particular country. And if you pick
Canada,
the right one,
Toronto is an example
yeah,
for that.
if you pick the right one, your chances are going to be better than potentially your own country's consulate. So that's another strategy that is utilized by attorneys in order to maximize your ability to get an approval.
All right, this is very good. Many people are joining. We got a good number of audience that is watching us. For those who have just joined the live stream, Joaquin, Rosales, Aramburu, could we just run a quick summary of 3 main pathways from E2 to green card and how to get them very quickly? And then we're going to address the rest of the questions.
Sure. So we went through a couple of them. The most logical one, and if it's feasible, economically speaking, is going to an EB-5, right? So the investment, as we've spoken before, it's a minimum of $800,000, perhaps. And we certainly do wish that you are in that point where you've done so well with your E2 business that you are essentially making enough money to then have the money to do an application for an EB-5. Aside from that, then we were talking about industries, right? Or having sort of a plan, right? Where you position yourself with an E2, and then later on you can work on your profile based on the business that you're utilizing here to have an E2, and then later on meet the criteria necessary, right? Because you've had an impact, right? Whether it be locally, nationally, whatever it may be, you've gotten some, sort of press coverage about it. You've made some contributions because you've helped a city develop whether it be applications or whatever it may be, right, on the technology side, and then you move from that to an application that will lead you to a green card, whether it be the EB-1A or EB-2 NIW, potentially, depending on what you have been focusing on prior to arriving here, or the current business focus that you have right now. And then there is questions about how to do it with an EB-1C. We discussed that having, typically, as we said before, being here in the United States makes it much easier, right, for an agent to make a determination that you are to the level necessary to be approved for a green card, because you've proven yourself and you have a track record here in the United States. So the L1, for example, is a good visa to have. It's an executive, higher management visa where you're being transferred to expand the business here, right? Client base, et cetera, as we spoke before. And then now you've done your work over here, you've proven yourself over here, and then you apply for an EB-1C, and now you have a residency, and you're happy here in the United States.
Got it. Let's go through quickly a few of the questions. If I change my status from B1, B2 to E2 with family, my child can go for college with local student fees, or I have to pay as an international student fees? This is basically
Okay,
saying that if I
we
move
have to
here,
be so if you're talking about college, we got to be careful here. We got to remember, so the E2 only allows you to bring in your children that are under 21. So college, you're typically looking at yes, 18 through 22. So let's make sure we understand that up to 21. The second they turn 21, it's no longer valid. They got to go back, or they have to be in a different status, which could be a student status, F1. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of students in the United States. So that's something that can happen. Regarding the fees, I believe that's based on the state. But if I believe if we're not accountants here, we don't. That's not really what we focus on. But I believe it's if you've been here at least I think for the state of Florida at least 6 months, and you're paying your taxes and you're resident here, then you can go to a local, not a local, but a state tuition college, which is much less than, say, a private college. I can tell you myself from my student loans. So yeah, so that's something that is feasible. Yes, correct.
got it. Hitesh Patel says nowadays Canadians having problems crossing border is any problem to get E2 visa.
Look,
I'm not sure I understand.
I think I got the question. So look,
what's the question?
Well, essentially, I think what he's saying is that people who are crossing the border, legally, right? Because there's a lot of traffic, and a lot of people think that everybody just goes from one country to other by plane all the time, but that's not the case. There's hundreds of thousands of people that go, just by the regular border, right, in the car or whatever it may be, right?
Right.
So we have to sort of separate the two, right? An E2 visa, once again, you go to the consulate, you're dealing with an officer over there. It's based on what you have worked and your team that works with you has worked on, business plan, the great business plan that you have based on the business that you're going to bring into the United States. That's separate, right? And once you get that stamp on your passport, I mean, you're coming in, unless some extreme circumstances that you have some crazy criminal record or something like that, which most likely will be addressed anyway at the consulate. Then you're probably getting in. So let's not confuse the two. And once again, there's thousands and thousands of people there are being entering the United States without a problem. And yes, people tend to focus on just like the bad news, right, or the negative news, and then they say, "Oh, look, they didn't let this one person in, and they didn't let that other person in." What happened? Was there some? Do you know the details? Did that person stayed a little bit longer than they were supposed to last time they were here in the United States? Perhaps that's what happened, right? I'm not saying they're not heightening a little bit the scrutiny of people who are trying to enter the United States. I'm not debating that, but I think that to say that just because people hear one or two or four or five stories on the news, which is the focus of the news, right, to get your attention, doesn't mean that's like a whole trend going on, right? So,
Right.
and let's separate, crossing the border from applying for an E2 visa at a consulate.
Thanks, Joaquin. Guys, please continue liking the video as we have new people joining in. We've been talking about how to get E2 visa. Sorry, how to get a green card through E2 visa, or rather how to transition from E2 visa to green card. To that extent, we have a question here, which I think is a very, very good question from News Poeticos. Thank you for the question. What about Mathnasium franchise for an E2? Can this be transitioned to an EB2 NIW in a STEM way? Now, this is a very, very good question, and it kind of sums up what we've been talking about: buying a franchise in an area of national importance and running it well, and later on, maybe looking at EB2 NIW. Joaquin Rosales Aramburu, what do you think of this question?
All right, can you give me a little bit of context about Mathnasium, though?
Okay, Mathnasium is a tutoring franchise.
You
should be seeing it all over Miami. It teaches math to kids.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I assume because of the name, but yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about this earlier. So if in the instances where you have the opportunity to come in through an E2 business, right? Visa that is focused on these topics are of national importance, right? And these fields are national interest, then you're in a great position, right? You're talking about math, right? You're talking about educating people. Now we have seen through an executive order that this administration is trying to sort of get rid of the Department of Education, which, in theory, they claim that is an opportunity for other ways to educate, the populace here in the United States. So through a franchise that is a tutoring club or educational franchise, perhaps that's a good position to be in order to present an argument that you are of the national interest, because now people have to be more reliant on sort of private forms of education as opposed to what up to now. We'll see where that goes. This is very new here in the United States, where before it was very reliant on a public education system. It still is very reliant on a public education system. So yeah, that could be a very
Right.
persuasive argument.
Right. One thing I'd like to add here is that a franchise might look good on paper, and technically, hypothetically, one can think of, oh, okay, this is a tutoring franchise. It should give me a good leverage when I'm applying for EB2 NIW. I would say that we want to make sure that we take a deep dive into the business, into their FDDs, what the business is about, what their growth projections are, and what are their exact line of services or area of expertise, so that we can actually build a national interest argument, right? Just because a franchise is hypothetically in the area of national interest of the United States of America doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to give you the leverage. For this case, magnesium, of course, in theory, absolutely. But we need to, do a bit of digging to make sure that this is indeed a good one that's going to help you do that. So hello, if I have E2 visa and I've come to the USA with business from Canada, can this business lead me to a green card / citizenship if I were to perform well in the business and it was growing? Well, this is what we've been talking about for the past 47 minutes, IS, and thank you very much for the question. The answer to that is, as our immigration attorney Joaquin Rosales Aramburu, who is acting as in-house legal counsel here at Franchise, has explained before, yes, absolutely. There are a few pathways. If you become successful with your business here, you are looking at not an automatic green card, but you're looking at a much stronger argument for whichever green card path you choose. And we have a repeating question from Laura. Can you bring 1 or 2 employees with the E2 visa? Very quickly, would you like to address that, Joaquin?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. That's called an essential employee visa. Only requirement is that the employee has to be a citizen national of the country, of your country, if you're the investor. And you just have to basically make the argument that you need that person in order to operate, or that person is going to enhance the operations of the business that is already been approved to come here to the United States. So first, you got to get approved yourself as an investor, and then you say, hey, I also need this person who, I don't know, it's has an integral part in running this business, or it would very much facilitate or help the business expand or be better. And then you can certainly apply for 1, 2, 3, depending on the business. You can do a lot of them. You can do a lot of essential employees. Yeah.
Can EB1C be applied immediately after L1A? I assume the answer to that is yes, but I would assume you would
How
say
immediate?
Better to spend some time, perform well,
Yes,
and get adjusted at least 6 months to 1 year, if not 2 to 3 years.
Because once
your
again, you
application
want to
on
demonstrate,
this.
and this is so like a reoccurring theme in today's conversation, right? And this is across the board in all visas, right? If you're put yourself in the shoes of an immigration agent, right? What looks better? A person that is trying to apply for a green card from the outside and hasn't quote unquote proven themselves that they can do the stuff that they claim they can do in the United States, or a person that's already here in a non-immigrant visa, meaning a visa that doesn't give you a residency, but you can still be here, work here, etc., and you've proven yourself, right? So the answer, I think, is pretty obvious, right? It's not automatic, right? But you're in a much better position if you are here already on a visa, L1, you've proven yourself, you've done a really good job. Then basically the company saying, look, we don't need this person, this manager, this executive to be there temporarily. We need them to be there permanently.
Based on
So
what they have achieved so far in our business here in the US.
exactly.
Right. Okay. I'm just looking at the other questions to see if there isn't anything that we haven't answered. If my spouse will be the main applicant for E2 change of status, can I fly international flight? Oh, good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I thought you were going a different route, which I love. But
Yeah,
anyway,
me too. So I thought.
well, we can talk about it after we answer the question. So, all right. So, for the audience, very important for you to know if you change status and you want to get an E2, I mean, you can leave the United States. I mean, nobody's going to obligate you to leave the United States, but you have to keep in mind that you have to plan accordingly because once you leave, you cannot go back and say, "Oh, I had a change of status approval." No, you have to go back to a consulate, typically your own country's consulate. But as we talked before, you know, if you have good guidance, right, good people next to you helping you out, you can go to different consulates where you have a higher probability of approval. But if you leave the United States after changing status uh, on to that of an E2, you have to get a stamp in your passport from a consulate. So you cannot just leave and come back. You have to plan accordingly and then get that stamp and the passport in order to basically have an interview. Just go basically through the process, right, of demonstrating that the business is going to be is doing well in order to come back. So you have to plan accordingly. So I don't know if we should answer the question that we thought they were going to ask.
Yeah.
Alaattin.
The answer to the question is, I guess, yes, I have the change of status. I cannot travel. I can travel, but like if I go, if I leave the country, I lose my status. But my dependent is here as well
Same thing.
in the same
Same
status.
thing.
It's
It's
the
for
same thing.
everybody. It's for everybody. It's for
All right.
everybody. Yeah. No.
Okay. So wrapping up, I guess we got 7 minutes left, guys. Look, I love this live stream. Thank you so much for joining and sending in your questions and giving likes. If you haven't done so, please give this video a like and post your question. We would like to address them in the upcoming minutes. And there is another one. Let's carry on with this. And for those who have just joined, we've been talking about ways to get a green card once you have the E2 visa. We talked about EB5, EB1A, EB1C, and EB2 NIW. You can go back to the video and see all those discussions. Now we're diverging a bit more into the dynamics of the E2 visa. Another question from Laura. Laura, thank you very much for sending in these questions. I hope you like this video. And please share it with your loved ones who are interested in this particular information. Does investment on the E2 visa may include investment on the E2 visa may include mobile home as office space? Does property title is before or after E2 approved? Okay.
All right. Let's just focus on the first
Let's
question because
decode this question first. What's the question here, Joaquin?
I think I think I can decipher the first part of the question. So whether or not it could count a mobile home, which is this is a first for me, can count as an office space for purposes of investing in the need to. I have never encountered that question. I would like to say probably not. Depending if it's going to be the home where you're going to be living at, certainly not. I would say that they probably frown upon that at the consulate. Um, and the key here, guys, is that you have to demonstrate that this is part of the requirements of the E2 visa, real and operating. So if you real and operating tends to relate to, do you have an office, right, website and all that stuff, right? You're running operations essentially, right? And then you can't claim that where you're living, I guess you could, but it's a much harder argument to make that
So you're
your office
basically
is
saying
going to
don't
be
push
your
it.
home.
Don't
Yeah,
push
and
it.
especially at mobile home. I don't know what the business is. Maybe like it has something to do with the business. So it has to be kind of intertwined with the business. If it's going to be
Yeah.
an office, right? Probably not the best idea to use your home as an office. No.
Okay. Very good. Joaquin, thank you very much. I mean, it's been a blast,
My pleasure.
and I think we should continue doing these every other week or bi-weekly. We generally do it with Patrick, but our audience loves you too. We would want you to show up as much as possible. Apart from that, I mean, E2 visa, although traditionally a non-immigrant visa, it's been seen among the immigration community a pathway to a green card, and it's been seen as technically a dual intent visa. And there are many pathways from E2 visa, although it itself doesn't transition into a green card, but you can use that business and the visa and your time spent here in the United States as a good leverage to build a stronger case for your green card. Can someone apply for E2 visa if they have a dominantly online business such as digital marketing services? This is a great question, Pharaoh. Pharaoh Sound Radio. Let me spend a few seconds on this. This is indeed, I don't know what you're going to say, Joaquin, but this is indeed a very, very good question. Among our audience, there are those who have online businesses such as marketing agencies, or they sell courses, they sell educational material. They do not necessarily need a brick and mortar office, but they do have a sizable business. They employ a lot of people, and their turnover is great. How do we bring them over here, right? Traditionally, the attorneys who are processing E2 visas are generally, I'm not going to say afraid of such cases, but they approach such cases with caution, which is natural, which is what they should be doing. It is certainly much more work. If you had a brick and mortar office and equipment, goods that you're selling, or whatever the case may be, it's a much more vanilla and easier to understand for the visa officer and easier for the attorney to build the case. But the good news on that is we, as Visa franchise, have really taken this to a heart and said, you know what, we want to crack this, crack the code of bringing an online business over here to the United States of America. In fact, one of our clients from Singapore has been approved with a digital marketing agency, and he had his employees around the world, and he brought his business here to Texas, and we helped them, meet the criteria. And the attorneys that worked on his case, spend a lot of time, and he got his visa, and he's now here in Texas. So it's harder, it's more complicated. Not everybody's willing to take some cases, and sometimes Joaquin says, guys, if you're taking these cases, you got to do something about it, because it's definitely not the traditional way of how these things are done. Very quickly, Joaquin Rosales Aramburu, what is your take on businesses that are predominantly online based, such as digital marketing services?
I don't think you need me here. I think you already answered. You're an attorney yourself already, man. You already answered it. But yeah, to
Thank
piggyback
you.
on what you said, I mean, you want to focus on, so like you said, brick and mortar, tangible things are sort of more objectively seen, I guess, from immigration officer perspective, as yes, I can see this is a a business, right? And you've done the expenses related to this business, but that doesn't mean that you cannot have a digital marketing business service. And you just got to focus more, or approach it with more caution, as Alaattin said. And you have to focus on employment here in the United States, right? Other forms of investment. There's maybe licenses that you need to invest on, platforms that you need to invest on, and those are obviously stimulating the economy you're buying, American essentially. So you have to be, tread with caution. Um, have a huge emphasis on employment here in the States as well, and then also interaction in business with other companies here in the United States. So yeah, so like Aladdin said, I think it was very well said. Just it's not impossible. It's not way more difficult. It's just something to to take a little bit more consideration, more time, and then to develop it and develop the right strategy in order to get the approval.
Thank you, Joaquin. And thank you guys for sending these questions and liking our video and joining our live stream. We have come to the end of our live stream. We're over a minute. Joaquin, Rosales,
Awesome
Aramburu,
time.
thank you so much for your time. And
Always a pleasure, Aladdin.
looking forward to seeing you next week. Until then, take care.
Bye bye.